Today is International Day of Parliamentarism, but here at home, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo says Parliament is likely to fail to prevent state capture should it happen again. Quite concerning coming from the Chief Justice. But Parliament's presiding officers have thus defended the institution, and they say they're working on implementing the recommendations of the State Capture Commission. So to unpack all of this, I'm now joined by Stefanie Fick, Executive Director of the Accountability Division at Outa. That's the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. Stefanie, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your time. First and foremost, do you agree with the Chief Justice? He made those, bold utterances saying, number one, our democracy in South Africa is at risk, and two, he's not sure if Parliament would be willing and able and have the capacity to prevent another state capture should it happen again. You're muted, Stefanie. Can you please just check your audio for us? We can't hear you at this time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
There you are. So it happens. It's okay.
But to your question, I think it's a very important question because, I think, there are definitely groupings in South Africa, as South Africans that will agree with Judge Zondo. Because what is it about? Will Parliament be able to stop the next time there's just a scourge of corruption and so forth? And unfortunately, I think because of the trust deficit, the fact that we know what happened in the past, the type of steps that Parliament actually took after, we got to know state capture and so forth, that the answer is still no. And then after the press conference from Parliament and, them trying to convince us that they are actually looking at their recommendations and did something about it, if you read it carefully, is that they've sort of decided, no, they are on the right path. And I know that they don't have to sort of listen, it's the three spheres of government, the three levels, and, they are independent from one another. But sure, if you want to find a solution, if you have from the judiciary recommendations as to how, as the legislative arm, you can improve accountability, you can improve transparency, one would expect that they will listen to the criticism, take the opportunity to really make a difference and go forward. And that this back and forth about pointing fingers and crouching on your authority is, in a democracy, I don't think there's space for that.
Yeah, we also heard from Parliament. They released that statement, Stefanie, almost defending themselves, calling the comments of the Chief Justice concerning the Speaker going a step ahead and saying she's not certain if the Chief Justice is impartial when it comes to this instance. Do they have a case here to answer? I mean, do they have a point in terms of defending themselves and perhaps why they haven't acted on those recommendations by the Chief Justice?
Well, they have a right to defend themselves. I think in what makes our democracy so beautiful is that we have a constitution and you have a democratic right to make your voice heard. What I don't understand is, yes, if you look at the legislative, judiciary arm and the executive, they are three sort of independent. They work by themselves. But, if you think about good governance and you think about a government governing on behalf of the people, then why don't they talk to one another? And isn't it about finding the best way forward? Isn't it finding, the best way to ensure democracy in South Africa? And does that not mean that maybe the legislative arm should talk to the judiciary? That doesn't mean that the one is necessarily crouching on the other's authority. Surely not. But I think what, defending themselves, may I just say this? I think the moment that we see that a Parliament is really holding people to account and that it's not party before, South Africa, that, they may have a right to stand up and say we're doing everything that we can. But unfortunately, if you look at what has happened, and just recently, the electoral, the opportunity to do some electoral reform to make sure that people's voices are heard, that whole idea of, party before the rest, they had an opportunity to change all of that. And they just do not seem to be in political will to actually just make things better. And listening to good advice has never mean that your independence are at risk.
It seemed to me as if, the Chief Justice also wants Parliament itself and parliamentarians to be held accountable. And he said that it's the people that needs to hold Parliament accountable, right? I mean, he made further recommendations saying that perhaps because oftentimes when we see these debates in Parliament, certain questions are withheld, certain questions are, are sort of prohibited from being asked. If you look at the different committees out in Parliament, we know that the ANC heads most of those committees, only Scopers, Khula Kohlengwa from the IFP heads Scopa, the Chief Justice further going on saying perhaps we need a standing commission of state capture, right, so that everyone can be free to ask all the questions they need, irrespective of your influence or your position. Could that be the way in terms of the public, the citizens, holding Parliament to account and putting more pressure on parliamentarians?
Well, it is definitely necessary that, the people of South Africa hold Parliament to account. And one of the ways, is we have a national election next year. And people need to understand that they still have the power to make their voices heard. Get involved in your local government, in your, in the matters that is of concern to you, and hold, government to account. I mean, the minute we quiet our voices is the minute our democracy is in trouble. But Parliament, looking at the recommendations, and you mentioned, Scopa and how they dealt with that, their answer to that problem is, the committees must, elect the chairpersons themselves, and they're not going to interfere. I don't think that is what the recommendation is about. It was not about Zondo telling Parliament what to do. It is for Parliament to listen. Again, it's about, good advice and to see, but if you put more of the opposition parties as chairpersons, wouldn't there be a balance? And isn't it about balance? It is not about who's right or wrong. And I know, we're talking about politics, and I will never understand politics, and the egos are enormous when it comes to politics. But, I have to believe that somewhere along the line, it is not about who's right or wrong. It is what is the best interest of the people of South Africa, who voted you into power, who want you in government because they believe in your ideologies. But then where did it go wrong? And then to receive certain recommendations in order to make that right, and then to sort of, in my view, brush it off, is not the way to build our democracy.
As I let you go, Stefanie, a point for our viewers to take home after this conversation. It is International Day of Parliamentarism. What should be our reflections as a country as we observe this day, do you think?
I think we should be grateful. There's a lot of people that worked hard to get us here, and we have to salute them. We have a democracy and we have a parliament. What we should do now is to, Parliament should hold the executive to account and legislate. That is their constitutional duty, but it's also our duty to make sure that that happens, and holding to account. Having our voices heard and never keep quiet. Journalists like you and your colleagues talking about the things that is wrong, and then sort of push Parliament in a direction where they will realize that what their duty is to govern in the best interest of South Africans. And we can never sit down and let this just go past. You know what? Democracy is a Greek word, and it says, demo and kratos, which basically means people govern. And we must never lose the fact that we do have the power, and that anybody that is in government should govern in the people's best interest,
right,
and no one else's.
And I appreciate you speaking to me. Thank you so much, Stefanie Fick, Outa's Executive Director of the Accountability Division at Outa. Stefanie Fick joining us this morning as we continue, of course, to observe International Day of Parliamentarism. A lot to be done, not just by members of Parliament, not just by the executive, but by citizens of this country.